You're listening to Boulder Uphill, the show where we find comedy and shared misery, discuss trending topics, and reflect on the uphill battles of pursuing a bold and creative life. All right, everybody, you made it. You're here. And this is episode 1 of Boulder Uphill. And I'm nervous. I think I've recorded maybe 9 takes of this. 9, 10, and I get about 45 seconds into each one, and I stop myself for some reason, and I think we're just going to let this one roll. We're going to do it. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Brian Whitehill, and the chances are slim that you know who I am, unless you are one of my friends that I told to listen to this podcast, or plugged it on my Instagram, or they sent it to their friends, which hopefully they're all going to do. In which case, you might be here from those plugs, and you're meeting me for the first time, and I just gotta say, hi, I'm Brian, and I'm gonna tell you what this podcast is about, and I'm really excited about it because it's number one, it's a passion project of mine, which means that I shouldn't be putting as much pressure on it as I currently am, and number two, it's been in the works for maybe 2 years, or at least like a inkling in my brain for 2 years, and now it's finally coming to fruition. All it took was a pandemic. Who knew? Okay, we're not going to start talking about coronavirus because we get enough of that news every day and our brains are full of it. But yes, this is taking place during the quarantine, which I think is inspiring a lot of people to start creative projects. And I think it finally inspired me to get started on the things that I've been putting off for a long time. And I'm lucky enough to be in a situation where I have the free time to do that. So right now I'm currently in Orange County, California, but I live in Los Angeles, and I moved to Los Angeles last June. I moved back from. You know what? We're not even going to talk about me yet. I have this whole outline for the podcast, and we're going to get to. I wrote this paragraph about like what I envision this podcast being, and it's going to ebb and flow. The podcast will change over time. As the viewers change, as I change, as we all grow, this paragraph and this vision will grow as well, and that's kind of the whole point, right? So before we even talk about my background or anything about what's currently going on right now, I want to read this, and then we'll keep moving forward. So I wrote, "This is the show where we're going to discuss the wins, the losses, the ups and the downs of living a creative life, paving your own way in a world that constantly encourages taking the safer path. This show is a place of solace for those choosing to take the roads less traveled, as well as those building up the courage to do so." Yeah, that works, right? Grammatically? We'll figure that out. We'll discuss trending topics as well as the creative industries in Los Angeles, New York City, major metropolitan cities, and around the world. Around the world, wow, that's bold. And around the country. I mean, maybe around the world at some point. Okay. And that's including my chosen field, which is acting, but in many other cases, writing, directing, photography, comedy, cinematography, sound design, you name it. And singing too. I have a lot of singer friends, but we'll get to that. Now, I guess music would be the better way to say that. Now, don't get me wrong. More often than not, yes, we'll be talking to people in the arts, whether it's behind the scenes or in the spotlight. But I'm also intrigued by the people who are being creative in the industries that are otherwise viewed as rigid, breaking the mold, if you will. The plan is to have my creative friends and colleagues on the show, and maybe even their friends, and maybe even their friends' friends, to discuss the success and the difficulties they've met while pursuing their chosen field. That's what I've got written. But what I don't have written in there, which I'm now realizing, is the fact that we're probably going to end up talking about trending topics. I mean, we are going to end up talking about trending topics because I can't roll into a podcast recording and just disregard everything that's going on in my life or disregard everything that's going on in the life of the person that I'm interviewing. But yeah, that the over-encompassing synopsis vision for this podcast is what I just said. I'm excited because I even 2 years ago when I was talking to people about starting something like this, it was going to be half a platform to talk about my thoughts on certain things, but mostly a platform for people who are currently in the thick of it. And I don't think we get enough stories of that, especially with the constantly curated Instagram feeds and the social media where everything just looks picture perfect. And I know that this is not a new concept by any means of somebody being like, you know, social media is fake. Like, we need to talk about the real stuff. Like, that's not unique, but I guess it's unique in the sense that I've never really talked about it, I guess. So where this all started was, you know what? I guess now is a good time to give some backstory of myself to then lead into the idea of this. So I'm Brian Whitehill, as I said already, and I live in Los Angeles, California, Hollywood to be specific. Currently in Orange County, living with my family until all the craziness is done, which will hopefully be soon. That's why this is kind of a rudimentary setup, if you will. I've literally got the camera on some books and a little mini tripod, and the microphone is on a stack of my stepdad's business cards. So that'll give you an idea of where I'm at and where we're all at, really, during this crazy time. And also, side note, I'm very tired of all the commercials. I don't have cable, but my mom and stepdad do. And I don't often watch commercials because I don't have cable, but now that I'm watching TV with them, it's crazy. The amount of commercials right now, every single one of them, whether it's Burger King or like Kia Optimas. Is that a car? Kia Optima? That's got to be a car, right? Anyway, or like other companies, whatever. Everybody's starting their commercials with "in these uncertain times." Where I'm just like, okay, that you might have thought that was going to be original, but literally with every commercial starting with that, it's not original anymore. And also, what I watched one last night where it was like, what did she say? The person on it was like, oh, it sounded, oh my God, it sounded so like condescending. It was like, blah, blah, blah. Okay, look, and by the way, I'm prefacing all this with understanding how important it is to stay home and everything like that. I'm not discounting what's going on, but this commercial was like so preachy. She was like, what'd she say? She was like, and remember to to stay apart from your, just because you're staying apart doesn't mean you can't blah blah blah. And then she was like, and remember, 6 feet apart. And it just, the way that she said it, I was like, look, we know, we get it. Anyway, I'm sorry, that was, I guess, an example of one of the ramblings. Okay, where was I was talking about not cable. I was talking about where I'm currently, yeah. So anyway, myself, Brian Whitehill, I graduated college in 2015 from Cal State Fullerton. And for most of you, you probably won't know that school. I don't think it's that popular of a name. Even people in California, some people are like, what's that? And I'm like, it's by Disneyland. And they're like, oh. And they still don't know what I'm talking about. If I were to say like Chapman, which is also by Disneyland, they would know the name Chapman. They'd be like, oh, cool. But because I say Cal State Fullerton, they're like, oh, that's really cool. And I go, yeah, it's right by Disneyland. It's 20 minutes away. They're like, oh, great. Anyway, went to Cal State Fullerton. I studied musical theater there, got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Musical Theater. And then right after that, I grew up in California, by the way. So right after that, I was like, you know what? I've had enough of California right now. I kind of want to change because I felt like I had always been in this bubble of California. And so I packed up and moved to New York City, which was incredible because yeah, it's like when you, I mean, a lot of people flock to California and I totally understand why. I mean, right now it's what, April something, or late April, and it's like 80 degrees outside. It's fantastic. So a lot of people flock to California, and I'm lucky enough to be from California. I was born closer to LA, like in LA County technically. And then when I was maybe 5, I moved to Orange County and I grew up closer to the beach and absolutely loved it. And then Cal State Fullerton is in Orange County. So it just, I've always felt like, I guess when I graduated college, I was very ready to just get out and go somewhere new, which was New York City. And I was there for technically 4 years. But one of those years, I was on a national tour. I was on the Mamma Mia national tour, which was very fun. And we don't need to get too much into my theater background on this episode yet. I'm sure we got all the time in the world, so we'll get into it. But anyway, so I moved to New York, was there for a year, did Mamma Mia national tour for a year. I ended up doing a regional contract. So doing that Mamma Mia, the show, in another state for 3 months. Anyway, at a certain point, I felt like it was time to come back. And also because I felt myself leaning more towards wanting to get into the screen world, TV, film, commercials, yada, yada, yada. So here I am. And I moved back from New York City last May. And then I moved to LA in June. And here we are now. It's almost been, in a week or so, it's going to be a year since I moved, which is crazy because it's flown by, but it's also gone very slow. Anyway, the whole point of me saying all that was my time in New York was very monumental to me as a person because I felt like I was becoming the actual version of me. Like it was my first time away from my whole family and like getting to discover who I am, and in a huge city with so many people from other states and countries and whatever. I felt like I was finally, like, I don't know the right words, but finally just on my own to explore how I operate in the world without a safety net, without the fallback of being able to just go see my parents, and my family. So yeah, New York was fantastic. But what I liked doing there while I was kind of climbing my way up the theater scene, which is a very difficult industry, and I'm glad I was a part of it and am a part of it. I hope to do more shows at some point. But I always would watch celebrity interviews, and it would be them, whether it's people from Broadway or even musicians and whoever, any influential figure. I loved watching their interviews from when with them talking about when they were younger and how it was when they were up and coming and how difficult it was, right? And because it served as a source of inspiration, but I always thought to myself, I wish I could hear from them when they were struggling. It's one thing to hear from, I don't know, Tina Fey when she's telling people like, "Oh yeah, when I was 23, I was working front desk at a gym and that really sucked." But how different would it be if we got to hear from that 23-year-old working behind the front desk being like, "Yeah, I'm into writing comedy and these are all my goals. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but like this is where I'm at right now." And I'm hoping it works out, because if we were able to just go back and listen to that, it'd be like mind blowing. We'd be like, "Wow, this girl had no idea where she was going, if any of her dreams were going to come true, or if any, eh, she just had this monumental hill in front of her, and she had no clue what was going to happen." And that I just always liked the idea of talking to people while they were in the thick of it. Um, so yeah, I had a lot of conversations in New York with people about that, and also I occasionally will record video logs for myself just to kind of keep, like, they're journal entries, I guess, if you will. I think I do better talking to the camera or like a voice memo than I do writing, because the thoughts flow out of me faster than my hand would be able to keep up with. So I record video logs every now and then for myself with this weird idea that at some point someone will watch it and be like, "Oh my god, that was Brian like way back when, before like he before he hit that or before he did that." Uh, Whether it's myself watching that, like looking back and being like, "Damn, I knew nothing," or if it's like, I don't know, if at some point I'm in an interview style thing like this, I can show the person like, "Oh, you think that I'm like all confident now, but actually here's where I was," right? So my whole idea of incorporating that like log was actually just to do it live, do it live, like talk to my friends and colleagues and people in the creative world who feel like they're looking uphill with no idea how to get there, and I think that if we hear more from the people in the thick of it fighting that uphill battle, regardless of the industry, it encourages all of us to keep moving forward. And I believe that this could be a platform for that. Whether or not it becomes super widespread, that would be amazing. But whether or not it becomes that, or if it just becomes a place for my friends and their friends to listen to them talk. And if it's a smaller network of people listening to this, fantastic. If it's a bigger network at some point, also fantastic. I just like the idea of it being a passion project that people can discuss where they're at and where they want to be. And also checking my camera. Okay, the camera's good. Just wanted to make sure that the battery was going. Let's hope that the camera keeps recording, because we're also doing this as a video podcast, which is going to be on YouTube. So I'm going to be figuring out all the platforms and whatnot. But yeah, this is going to be audio and then also a video, which is really cool. Anyway, another inspiration for this podcast was the fact that I was in an acting studio in New York City during my last year there, and I hadn't taken. I obviously trained in acting during college, but I hadn't jumped into one in New York City that I liked, and I finally found one my last year in the city, and it was the Matthew Corzine Studio Theater, and I fell in love with all of my classmates and the structure of it, because at the very beginning and end of every class, the end of every class, he would Matthew. I call him Matt. Do people call him? I don't know. Matt, are you watching this? Do people call you Matthew? Anyway, that'd be weird if they do. That's so formal. He would ask the class at the end of every class one thing that they were grateful for, and we got to share what we were grateful for, but then also it was a reminder of things that we should be grateful for. But then also at the beginning of every class, he would have different prompts for us. So he would say, what's one thing that you feel like you need to release this week? Or what's one thing that's bothering you this week? Or what's a win of this week? Or what's a loss of this week? It just a different prompt. And because we all feel so isolated, I mean, right now in the quarantine world, we definitely feel isolated. But in life, we feel like we're fighting, for the most part, we feel like we're fighting these battles alone, and that maybe no one else has fought those battles or is currently fighting them. So just hearing somebody say, "Oh, I'm worried about that I'm just treading water and nothing's gonna come of my pursuits," I'm like, damn, I'm thinking the same thing. But I'm glad to know that I'm not alone. Also, I'm glad to know that everyone before me has thought that. I mean, yeah, I would. You're a little crazy if you don't doubt yourself at all during any creative pursuit. I can't, like, that's just a part of it. But when it's so ingrained in your brain, like, no, I'm going through this, and you're worried about judgment from other people or failing and falling in front of other people, it's just nice to hear these things from the people around you. So that really was inspiring for me, because I was like, there's so many things that I could share and that I did share in that class while I was going through them, that the other people in the class related to. So I think that's a really useful idea, is just not being afraid to share the struggle. And that's part of what this is all about, the wins and the losses of those pursuits. And the more that I've thought about this podcast, the more that I've realized I don't necessarily want it. I don't want to exclude anybody, so if someone's listening and they're like, "Hey, well, I'm an app developer and I feel like that's like a unstable path." I'm like, "Hell yeah, it is. Like, I would love to hear from you." So it's not even necessarily just pertaining to the arts. It's just that's what I know. But I know that there's plenty of unstable or irregular paths, like off the standard path that we should take, I guess, like the standard career paths. That's just always been a thing in my brain, because I grew up in Orange County, Irvine first, and then Newport Beach, and a lot of the people I went to school with, very wealthy. I grew up with a single mom. She's a teacher, lover, and my sister. So we were not rolling in money, and yet I was surrounded by people. Our student parking lot had nicer cars than the teacher parking lot. It was like Audi, BMW, Range Rover. It was crazy. So I grew up around just so much wealth, so much wealth. And I'm very lucky to have grown up in the beautiful city that I did. I was like a 10-minute drive from the beach. It was crazy. I've gotten a lot of perspective on that since moving to New York and everywhere else. But a lot of the people I went to school with, they went off to college, and then they came back from college and like still have their parents' credit cards to use freely, and they like either, I don't know, joined real estate or joined their father's company. And I always compare myself to them because I'm like, I wonder how they view people who kind of go off that path. Because I mean, I guess the living's not bad. If you know that you're going off to, USC, and you're like, well, this is cool. Like, I get to live up these years, and then my dad has a job waiting for me at his company when I get back. I mean, that's a specific way of living. And that's also the way it goes in Newport Beach a lot of the times because uh, people go off to school, they come back, and then oh my God, hold on, I'm double checking my camera. It's going to overheat. Oh, it's overheating. Hey, everybody. So, if you are watching this right now, it means two things. Number one, it means that you've made it 20 minutes into this video, which is crazy. You've spent the last 20 minutes listening to my voice and watching my face. And I thank you for being here. But it also means, number two, that something went terribly wrong during the editing process of this last week. And I'm smiling right now, but I'm actually very mad about it. Long story short, during the editing process of this, I was cleaning up my hard drive. I didn't back up files properly. I deleted a file that I thought was an outtake, and it turns out it was the last half hour of this video. It was in the morning, and I used a variety of applications to recover it from the SD card that it had been deleted off of, from the emptied trash. Nothing worked, and I took a day to simmer down, and then the next day I re-recorded episode 1, and it just didn't feel as authentic, so I chose to just keep it real with you guys, and I'd rather go a less polished route with the video the first time around and keep it authentic as opposed to making everything super polished but having it not feel as authentic to me and to you who's watching. So it was oh man, that was a day. I spent literally 9 hours trying to recover what I deleted, and lessons were learned. Big lesson. And I have my external hard drive. I grabbed it from LA, and we're gonna move forward in true Boulder Uphill fashion. We're gonna keep pushing, and it was a setback. We rolled backwards. Now we're gonna roll forwards. And again, I thank you guys for watching and listening. And actually, this is a perfect opportunity for me to link, if you want. The rest of the video is just gonna be audio with my logo up, and then there's also 30 seconds at the end for just a sign off that I was able to salvage. But if you want to keep listening, you can either stay here, or I'm going to put in the description below the podcast links to the major podcast platforms. So we're here, you're here. I'm going to let you get back to the podcast. And again, I thank you for being here. And I'm still so excited for this to continue and to keep moving forward with this. So yeah, that's all. And you're about to hear my voice again. Okay. Bye. Okay, so we just experienced our first technical difficulty. And I almost took that as an excuse to not continue moving forward today, but I decided to keep going. I grabbed a different camera that is in this office, and we're gonna keep moving forward, even though I've completely lost track of what I was talking about. I have this small little powerhouse camera. It's the Sony RX100 Mark V, and it's this little baby camera that packs a punch, right? And I tweaked it to where it can record unlimited amount of time for the video, but the little battery in it can't handle the overheating. So I had it plugged into an outlet, and we're gonna have to figure that out. But in the meantime, I'm using this camera until that's all worked itself out. But what I remember I was talking about, it's funny because you guys are listening to this and you're like, we remember what you're talking about because that was 25 seconds ago. I know that I was talking about people that I grew up with, and how I guess in my own skewed brain, I always view them as like the people following the safer path, which is a huge broad statement only because the loudest ones that I've seen are the most obnoxious ones I went to high school with. Are like that. And I don't like seeing their updates, which is why I unfriended everybody. that I didn't care about the second I left high school. But that's a whole other story. But yeah, so I guess that's how I view things, and that's why I've always really been intrigued by the creative people that I meet along the way who were like, yeah, my parents wanted me to get into this, but here I am doing this. I love that stuff, especially when it works out. But isn't it so much more interesting hearing from someone who's hoping it works out? And so, anyway, that could be just a variety of industries. I just happen to know mostly the creative industries. So that's who we'll be interviewing at certain points once I can get them in person. I might do Zoom interviews. We'll see. That's something that I've been toying with the idea of. But I don't know. We'll figure that out. As you guys can tell, for the most part, aside from technical difficulties, this is going to be a very like uncut type thing. If there's pauses, I have to let there be pauses. The YouTube channel I had in New York City, I got used to being able to like, oh, if I don't like that take, let me redo that one, or let me cut. I'm recording a 10-minute video. Great, I can mix and match. This is just gonna be the camera and I, the microphone and I, and obviously when interviews happen, them and I, and we're gonna see how it rolls. And I think that's just generally what I love about the podcasts that I listen to is that it feels just like a rolling conversation. When there's lulls in the conversation, we let there be lulls, and then we circle our way back. Obviously, it's best to have an outline like I do, but I am also such a planner that I try to plan everything perfectly to a T, and I never actually start. So this is something where I was like, you know what, I can write every point that I want to hit, and like really make sure I make a huge outline. But at some point, I just have to start it. So that's why we're doing it. And if I miss some things on my outline that I have for this episode, then I miss them, and then we'll do them next week, and it's gonna be fine. So let's see what we have. I guess this is the perfect time to do an ad break. And mind you, we're not sponsored by anybody. Or yet. We're not sponsored by anybody yet, because this is a new podcast. You're listening to history being made right here. But to get the general outline or the structure of what this podcast could hold in the future, we have our own ads. Maybe they'll be user submitted at some point. I don't know. But let's do an ad, okay? This episode is brought to you by the guy who invented the skip ahead 30 seconds button for podcast apps. Because nobody likes when a podcast starts with 5 minutes of ads talking about an app or a burrito company. You know it, I know it. And now we'll make sure he knows it. The guy, I mean, that invented the button. There, you can skip that. Will I regret saying this if this podcast ever gets sponsored and I start to do ads? Probably. But we're here anyway. So thank you to the guy who invented the skip ahead 30 seconds button. And that's all for ads. And meanwhile, in my ear, I can hear my mom talking in the kitchen. And I'm really hoping that you guys can't hear that too. If you can, my apologies. And that's just where we are. I think we're all a little disheveled right now, staying healthy and just rolling with the punches in life, but especially right now. I can really hear her in my ear. Maybe I'm going to just shoot her live on the air. I'm going to text my mother saying, what should I text her saying? This mic is super sensitive. I've got about half an hour left, or maybe less. We'll see. I just feel like that's so rude. I'm like, I have my own place in LA, and I just feel like I'm, taking up their space here. So I don't want to come off. You know what? I've got about half an hour left. I'm going to leave it at that. Send it off. I can so hear her. Anyway. Oh, what a day. What a life. So we did the ad break. Oh my God. I would love it if I have so many products that I sell my friends on that I get them to like as well. Like Halo Top. Man, if Halo Top ever sponsored this podcast, I'd be the happiest guy in the whole world. Halo Top? I'd be like, guys, pistachio flavor, you gotta have it. And they have dairy free for all you vegans out there. Or like cookie butter. Come on. This episode, this podcast is brought to you by Trader Joe's cookie butter because it's so good. But the crunchy cookie butter, because everybody knows the crunchy cookie butter is better. Not the smooth cookie butters. That's the first one that I got introduced to, but crunchy cookie butter is just better. We all know it. You know it. Unless you haven't tried cookie butter, then go to Trader Joe's. Well, maybe not right now. Maybe they're out of it. Who knows if they're out of it? It's mostly just toilet paper and the frozen foods that they're out of. Anyway, hopefully we get sponsored at some point. Uh, what is up on the agenda next? So another like inspiration for this is because you know how New York City is portrayed in movies and TV, like these people, these guys or girls, they're like writers and they have giant Soho apartments. I feel like that's what everybody views New York City as. And also, there's such a skewed version of LA that people have. People view Hollywood as glamorous. I can tell you from someone that lives there in Hollywood, the city of Hollywood is not glamorous at all. Anyway, there's a skewed version or vision of New York City that I just noticed when I was living there. I mean, there's a lot of glamorous parts of New York, just like there are of Los Angeles. But you always see in like you see those things in TVs and movies, TVs. And I was listening to something the other day where it was like someone's, I don't know, maybe it was a New York City podcast, but they were like, I just graduated school and now I'm here. I just moved into my apartment. It's a one or I forget it was one or two. It's a 1 or 2 bedroom in Soho or maybe it was Chelsea, in Chelsea. And I was listening. I was like, duh, do you know how expensive that is? Like when I moved to New York City, I got really lucky, but I was living up in it's called Hamilton Heights now. But I was living like the bohemian lifestyle and I loved it. I was living with 4 people and thankfully I loved all of them. Because I moved in with them before I moved into this apartment before tour and I was subletting and then I went on tour and I came back and some of those people had left the apartment. So then I brought in some friends from tour. One of my best friends, Andre, he brought his best friend Cliff in, and now Cliff's one of my best friends. Anyway, I was living with 4 people up until the age of, I'm 26 now. I'm going to be 27 soon. But anyway, like that, the amount that you can afford in New York City, unless you're working like a super high end job, is not that much. So when I would hear recording or not recordings when I hear from people who are living like a lifestyle that's just not relatable, I was just like, why don't I hear from someone who is living like not in not luxury. Luxury is the wrong term. You know what I mean though. It's like we don't necessarily get the full picture. So part of what this podcast is about is providing that. You know, you can go on YouTube right now and search moving to Los Angeles vlog and you're going to find plenty of, you know, little influencers moving into these giant apartments and you kind of have to stop and wonder where that money's coming from. So, hey, you know what though? Maybe those people just moving to Los Angeles, maybe they earned that money and maybe they got that giant apartment with the money that they earned. Does that always happen? Probably not, but I have to give them the credit because what do I know? Not much, but that's just what I see. So part of what this is giving like a relatable sense. Like I never heard from any like quote unquote bohemian style like living situations in New York City. I always just like when you search it online, it's like very unrelatable. It gives this like cutesy little lifestyle blogger version of New York, and it doesn't give you. That's another thing too. They never show the subways in New York on TV and in film. The most accurate depiction of New York City subways was from what I can remember right now was in Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. They always just like show people getting into taxis, and it's like, hey, guess what? If you're 24 or 23 living in New York City, more likely than not, the way that you're going to be able to afford anything is not by taking Ubers and taxis everywhere and not by living by yourself. It's going to be living with a few other people and definitely having a Metro card and definitely sweating your ass off over summer on a crowded train with someone's armpit in your face. or free. Anyway, we don't need to get into New York City stuff, but that was just one of the inspirations for this. Was just kind of like, wow, I don't actually ever really hear from someone in a similar situation. So maybe this is gonna be inspiring to somebody. I don't know. We're going with it. We're rolling along, just like the camera cut out, and I had to switch it for everybody watching on YouTube. You're looking at different camera quality right now, different angle. Maybe I might actually end up using this camera from now on. We'll see. What else? So yeah. Yeah. And oh, that's another thing too is when it comes to the scope of podcasts, everybody says, oh, it has to be very specific, like have a theme. But I didn't want my chosen career path, the field that I'm on, or the whatever, the field that I'm pursuing, whatever. I didn't want that to be the topic of this podcast. I didn't want to be like, welcome everybody. This is Acting Podcast 101, and it's called Off Stage or Off Book, or like you have to find little cutesy slogans for the name pertaining to the topic. I was like, what am I gonna over the shoulder shot with Brian Whitehill? Like I don't want it to be that specific, but also I don't want it to be so broad where it's like, hey guys, like come listen to me talk about everything in life ever. Like no, I want there to be some type of scope, and not too specific. I like to leave it open to where, like, if I have someone on who's a singer, or one of my best friends is a director, if he comes on and we just like rant about the movie we just saw, then so be it. Then we have a 5-minute rant about the movie we just saw. We don't have to, or whatever. If we talk about the burger we just ate and like, oh man, you got to go visit this place because they got great burgers. It's not always going to be like how to hit your mark, method acting. It's like I don't know. I can't stand that stuff. I get too much exposure to the acting world on a daily basis anyway, from just like my social media feeds. I don't need another thing, but maybe someone does, and that's a podcast for them. But then this podcast won't be for them. It'll be for you, the person, the person listening and watching. So yeah, I didn't want it to be. And also, I've seen so many like, this is the podcast for millennials. Getting ghosted. What's that all about? And it's like, we've talked about that so much. Like Tinder, who needs who needs it? Like I can't with. It's like, yes, there are relevant topics to talk about, but it's just like, how many people do we need to talk about ghosting with? God, anyway, I'm not going to get into that. Yeah. So, what we should talk about though is, I have a little note, and I said, yes, I was resistant to make this for a long time, because in my head, I think that you can't make a podcast unless you already have an audience. Like, there's no way that a podcast could reach a lot of people if you're not already quote unquote famous or already have a huge Instagram following or blah, 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 blah. Like, that's just my view of it. And I finally had to snap out of it and be like, you know what? This isn't for a giant audience. If it reaches a lot of people at some point, then fantastic. And if it doesn't, again, fantastic. But I can't let that stop me. That's like anyone who's ever started anything. If they had just been like, oh, well, I don't have a backing, it's like if, I have no examples right now, but I mean, it's like did we talk about Tina Fey earlier? It's like if Tina Fey was like, oh, well, I'm not one of the comedy greats, so like, why would I even try to get into comedy? Why would I even try writing? Like, no, everybody has those doubts at the top and throughout. You shouldn't let that stop you. So just because I don't necessarily, I'm not an influencer on Instagram. I don't have this giant, huge following, because the annoying thing is I do see a lot of people on Instagram that have those huge followings and they're not even that funny, but then they create a podcast and all of their people go listen to that as well. And I'm like, all right, I mean, you got your fans for somehow, I guess. But anyway, I don't think that that's the only way that you can start something like this. And so here we are, and I started it. But what's the oh god, the desk, the most annoying thing, the hardest thing about starting this, aside from pushing record and following through with the episode like I'm doing right now, is coming up with the name. The name was so difficult, because if you think of any popular phrase you've ever heard in your whole life, type that into Google and add podcast to the end, it exists. Everything. All of it. I've had so many name ideas and every single one of them was taken. It actually was supposed to be uphill, downhill, like uphill, downhill with Brian Whitehill. Um, but then that stopped rolling off the tongue. And then a perfect example of why it's so important to collaborate with other people is that's kind of where this name came from. I've talked to a few people in my life and I was like, this is what the concept is. And I want to focus on like the uphill battle. That's where uphill came from. And so my friend Jared, he was like, well, what about uphill? And I was like, that's too short. I'm not going to do that. Just uphill with Brian Whitehill. I don't like that. I mean, and also I think that that already exists. I don't know. So then I sat on it for a while, and then another person was like, how about uphill, downhill? And I was like, that works. Let's do that. And then I sat with that. And then, the cool thing, the significance of the name of this channel and podcast, specifically podcast, is my friend Jared, he was like, well, what about the myth of Sisyphus? And so Sisyphus, what a name, was a Greek king, and it's in Greek mythology, who like disrespected the gods, and so he was condemned to forever push a boulder uphill. And I sat on that, and he was like, yeah, what about like, something having to do with Sisyphus? And I was like, yeah. And then I was like, he pushes a boulder uphill. Boulder, like, it's like that old game called Mad Gab, like, what was it? I'm a love machine. You remember those commercials? Am I that old? There was a game called Mad Gab, which is also kind of on Instagram right now. Where it's like name the gibberish. But there was a commercial called for this game called Mad Gab, and it was like the word you pick a card, and it was like I mul of mush and the guy's like I'm a love machine. I'm a love machine. That's that's how it was with boulder uphill. I was like, okay, he's pushing a boulder uphill, and I was like, huh? Boulder uphill, because the bold go uphill. The boulder people push the boulder uphill. Anyway, so that just where it rolled from. And then also someone said there was a writer named Albert. Oh, see, this is how I would pronounce it, but actually he's French, and he's probably a French author. I think he's a French author, and this is the French pronunciation, Albert Camus, which is nice job, Brian. And so he wrote about Sisyphus, and he said he imagined Sisyphus smiling while pushing the rock up the hill and embracing his situation without thinking of the past or the future. And I am somebody who constantly thinks about the past and the future too much. Like, I'm so weird where I like imagine decades from now, like looking at this I just like get so caught up in everything except for right now. And so that stuck with me too. And I was like, okay, boulder uphill, Sisyphus, we're smiling, embracing the situation without thinking of the past or future. I love that. I think that's cool. So here we are at Boulder Uphill, the podcast. I love it. So, yeah, coming up with the name is hard. That's all I got to say. Literally anything you can think of. I have a whole. It just took me one night sitting down for an hour and just word vomiting every name I could think of, and then looking up synonyms. And so we got there eventually. Just shout out to everybody that helped me come up with the name. My mom is adorable. When I told her I was going to be doing this, I was like, yeah, an interview and yada yada yada. She's like, how about you call it Family and Friends? I was like, okay, good idea. I will note that. But also, I'm sure that exists. I haven't actually Googled it. Google it and tell me in the comments on YouTube, or I don't know, on Instagram, whether it exists or don't. What a weird plug that was. In the comments below. Okay, we got through that whole first page. And yeah. Oh yeah. You know what I do want for this podcast at some point is like requests from the audience. I think I'm going to set up an email or something where people can like request topics. Because don't get me wrong, we can hear the dog. There's the dog. I'm not an expert by any means on acting or on life or on millennial stuff, but I feel like it's always helpful to hear a different perspective from someone around your age, or someone, the whole concept, going through the thick of things. Like I ask people's opinions all the time, or like for their common experiences. So, hey, I think I'm gonna set up a thing, and if you want to hear me talk about something, then let's do it. And I can give like what insight I have, and also if it happens to line up with an interview, then great. Then the person that I'm interviewing can give what insight they have, and we can have a whole conversation about it, which is what the whole point of this podcast is. I love it. Can I just point out that, I don't know, we're roughly 43 minutes in, and we're starting this in such a different place than when we started, even with the stuff that happened in between, where I had to cut the camera, cut the recording, and everything. This is the conversation we're now having, and I can't wait. I'm so excited. Truly, I'm so excited for this to keep going, because this is what I want. I want this conversation to be happening, even with my stepdad talking in my ear from the other room. I don't know if you can hear that. I love it. I love it. Another thing too, I read this book by Jenna Fisher, and it's like the actor's survival guide or something like that, a long time ago when I was planning the move to New York City, planning the move from New York City to Los Angeles. I listened to the audiobook of Jenna Fisher, the actor's survival guide, and she talks about hiding the brushstrokes. I don't know if you could just hear that, but my dog just yawned in the other room. That's great. So she talks about hiding the brushstrokes and how artists in general should not, because it does everybody else a disservice. So so let me explain that, and also explain why this podcast is my personal version of not hiding the I was going to say breathstrokes. Breaststroke? Swimming? No, this is my personal version of not hiding the brushstrokes, because I think that everybody should be transparent in their struggle and on their journeys, especially in very difficult artistic fields where the chances are just the odds are rarely in your favor. That's why I respect the hell out of the people who keep going regardless. So part of that was it was a quote from I wish that I had kept the name of the guy who said this, but he was I believe he was the creator of Mad Men. And he said, artists frequently hide the steps that lead to their masterpieces. They want their work and their career to be shrouded in the mystery that it all came out at once. It's called hiding the brushstrokes. And those who do it are doing a disservice to people who admire their work and seek to emulate them. If you don't get to see the notes, the rewrites, and the steps, it's easy to look at a finished product and be under the illusion that it just came pouring out of someone's head like that. People who are young or still struggling can get easily discouraged because they can't do it like they thought it was done. An artwork is a finished product, as it should be. Oh, and it should be. But I always swore to myself that I would not hide my brushstrokes. So I think that pretty much encapsulates everything that I've been talking about, and part of the motivation for this. And his name was Matt Weiner, the creator of Mad Men. He said that, and it was for aspiring artists. And so that's one of the things that added to the jambalaya of inspiration for this. And also, we're going to pause because I think that the camera turned off. And the camera turned off. So we are just rolling with the punches today, but don't worry, we are almost done. Oh, thank God. So I can figure out this camera situation, which I should have figured out previously before starting this. But you know what? That's what we're doing. That's the whole point of this. This could be a test run, but I have a feeling that this is going to be episode 1. And if you're listening to what I'm saying right now, that means this is episode 1, which is fantastic. So I think, let me see. Yeah, I just say how I like recording relatable things that hopefully someone in the future can relate to, or someone currently right now can relate to. And that was also one of the reasons why I liked having my YouTube platform in New York City. I've always liked making videos. I remember in high school, I made the rounds. I made this video with my friend Max Stecca. He and I made this video called Chocolate, where literally we're just fighting over a piece of chocolate. It was so dumb. I think I have it somewhere on my computer. But like everyone in my class, I think it was in 8th or 9th grade, everyone, like I went back to school and they're like, hey, I saw your video. And then people were like, I just heard people being like, I heard them talking about it. Were they making fun of us? Probably. And that's okay. But anyway, part of the reason why I liked having my YouTube platform in New York is because I actually got a fair amount of subscribers from it. Not that was ever the point. And also, I think it got up to like 3,000, which is not much in today's standards. But what I loved was people actually came up to me and recognized me in New York City, which was crazy. I went to a restaurant like multiple occasions, but I specifically remember I was with my friend Steve and we went to a restaurant, and the host at the restaurant was, he was like, "Are you Brian Whitehill?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I just moved to New York City and I watch all your videos." And I was like, and that happened on multiple occasions. So that made me feel so good. The fact that I was inspiring anybody, that's crazy to me. And I love that. I love the idea of having an inspiring platform of any kind. And I think that's been my driving motivation in a lot of things. Probably definitely acting as well, and like telling stories. But we had a lot of time to have that conversation. But yeah, it was the YouTube thing was mostly for me, but then it ended up resonating with a lot of people. And it's also so cringy to look back on now because I'm like, I feel like I look like such a child. But that's whatever. Yeah. So you know what? I think we're gonna call it there. I had like something else that I wanted to talk about in terms of like what I'm thinking or like what I'm dealing with right now in life. But I feel good about this in the sense that it was a solid intro to who I am as a person and what my goals are for this, and why this all came to be. So if you got this far, just thanks, because this has been there's been a lot of thought put into this and a lot of build up, and we finally got here. So let me just think really quick if there's anything else that I was planning on talking about. I think I gave mostly my background. I think that I mean, I think I said how, yeah, like I live in LA and I'm an actor and I like hearing from, yeah, I said all the things. Sorry, I'm just like, again, the self-critic. So you know what? Even if I didn't get to everything that I wanted to today, I think that we're going to call it there before something else happens with this camera or with this mic. We're gonna cut it and call this episode 1, which is so crazy. Episode 1 is done, and I'm gathering a list of people to interview. My friends from my class in college, who and other classes from my college, people that I work with, because people from my college, they're on Broadway, they're in national tours. A friend of mine is on a big TV show, and I would love for her to talk about that on here. So I have there's a good list of people that I think would be, and also, yeah, one of my best friend Jared, he's a director, and my other best friends in New York, they're in the creative world. So there's, yeah, we got Broadway, we got TV, we got movies, we got all the things. I know singers, I know directors, I know some cinematographers, I know some I said singers, and some people in comedy, and my friend one of my friends in New York, who I love very much, she's writing a novel. So there's a whole list of things and people to talk about, and I'm so excited to get there. But we're gonna take our time. So I think that's it. And as for following this journey of this podcast, there is an Instagram up called at Boulder Uphill Pod. I'll link it in the video, and also, and you'll see it because you have eyes. And well, I guess that's, if you have bad vision, it's at Boulder Uphill Pod. I don't want to exclude anybody who can't see it or read. Okay, that's it. We got to stop before I keep rambling. That's all we got. So this has been episode 1 of Boulder Uphill, the podcast, and go to Instagram at Boulder Uphill Pod to see more updates. And I will see you guys back here next episode. I'm Brian Whitehill, and I'm signing off. And I don't have a good sign off yet, but I'm as of today, it's what did I think of earlier? Stay bold, keep climbing. Yeah, I like that. Okay, that's all we got. Bye.